let's introduce our two studio guests. Now, Jenny, who's been here before, Jenny Gibson, in a different guise from Aaron and Partners, and Alicia Skett from the HR department, making her debut today, aren't you?
So, yes, thank you for having me.
Good to see you, good to see you. We'll be talking about the Shropshire Business Awards as well in the studio a little bit later, and you're shortlisted for an award, aren't you? So,
I am.
So, nervous, looking forward to it?
A little bit nervous, but yeah, my interview went well, so...
Now, in the headlines over the last couple of months, really, I think, I've certainly noticed, and we were talking about it in the studio here, about how the issue of employers' attitude towards handling menopause strategies in the workplace is more prevalent, I think, than it's ever been. And I know that you wrote a piece, Jenny, in the Shropshire Business Magazine this month, so I suddenly thought, you're the perfect person to kick us off here. Maybe sort of, start from the beginning, really. Do you agree that it's being talked about more now?
It is definitely being talked about more now. Yeah, it's definitely something we're getting a lot of questions about from clients, and it's something that the government is looking at. So where sort of like recently, my article, what I did write about, it was the women's qualities for the Parliament committee, and they made a number of recommendations to the government in relation to addressing not say this issue, but this sort of acknowledgement really that women in a particular age bracket are going through the menopause, and they are having, it just can, for a percentage of those women, make it a lot more difficult to perform potentially at the same level in the workplace. And they made a number of recommendations, and some of those were accepted by the government, and some weren't, as I sort of set out in my article. But it's definitely something that is coming to the forefront now. And over saw some statistics, and in the past year, there's been a 50% increase in tribunal claims that mention menopause as part of the issue there.
And is that increase would be because these conversations have been going on before, but they've just been going on in private and they've never got as far as a tribunal?
Yeah, I think that's got to be the case. So there's lots of research that's been going on over the past few years, and sadly, one of the one of the studies that came back was that I think it was like 25% of women have really struggled in the workplace and haven't had support from employers, and I think it was something quite shocking as 1 in 10 actually left their job because they didn't get the support they needed. So I think this is a real issue. It is something, thankfully, that's being talked about more. It's coming to the forefront.
And Alicia, from an HR perspective, if you're an employer and you hear, a survey like that, potentially some of your staff are so unhappy or feeling so uncomfortable about raising something like this that they might leave, I mean, that's a nightmare, isn't it, for an employer?
Yeah, and I think the first thing to do is to contact someone like myself or Jenny that could give guidance on it. I mean, we can guide you on how to make reasonable adjustments within the workplace, how to educate. I mean, that's HR's message all the time, educate and communicate. And once you've done that education, we can help implement policies to underpin that so that staff can really see that their employer is trying to make a difference, they're trying to make a change. They could even give examples of the changes that they're willing to make so that they can say, okay, I feel comfortable to approach my employer and say, I'm going through the menopause, what can you do to help me?
Because you can't educate until you feel comfortable to communicate, though, can you? That's the problem, isn't it? So,
creating that environment, isn't it, where people who are going through those issues feel that they can go and speak to someone openly about it. And like you said, like about educating other staff as well. There are more and more women in that age bracket than ever in the workplace. So that women are, obviously potentially at the very, very sort of almost at the peak, of their careers. They've, can add a huge amount of wealth of knowledge. So keeping those people in your business is, in the long term, is going to really help employers.
That's what I was going to say. I think a lot of the issue sometimes is that employers have a short-term mindset rather than a long-term. And by thinking about those support mechanisms, they can retain the talent, the knowledge, the experience, and those people can guide the next generation rather than using the next generation to just replace them because they're seen as an issue.
What sort of, how easy are some of the things that employers could do to ease this situation, that are maybe not being done, or even things that they just don't acknowledge or don't understand?
Well, there's a huge range of things that they can do. I'm sure Alicia's got some examples, but things that sort of spring to my mind are things like breaks to deal with, if women need things like simple things like getting some fresh air if they're having hot flushes, just by way of example. Changing hours. So one of the symptoms of menopause can be that people have very difficulty sleeping, and that can have a knock-on effect. So having some flexibility on allowing people potentially to work from home, to give them a bit more time in the mornings, or just let them start a bit later, can make a huge impact on that woman's life.
And that's something we're more flexible doing now anyway, isn't it? Since the COVID pandemic, we are working from home that little bit more. So I guess that's made it easier in terms of flexibility in that respect.
Yeah, I was going to say, regards to hot flushes, there's so many cost-effective, reasonable adjustments that can be made. So, just placing them next to a window or a fan, making sure they've got access to cold water. If you wear uniforms, maybe relax the dress code a little. I know some women struggle with sweating, so if you do wear a uniform, you could provide an additional set so that if they need to get changed midway through the day, they can. I know one other symptom is mood swings, so just educating managers on how to appropriately deal with that and sensitively. And going back to flexibility, I know GPs have introduced menopause clinics, so allowing them time off to go to them, and not nitpicking when they've got lots of medical appointments, because if it's related to that, then it's reasonable.
This sounds like it's a real conversation between the employer and the employee when this is,
absolutely.
This time,
Who needs to take the lead on that, though? That's one of the things, isn't it? Should it be the employer noticing and appreciating these things and breaking the ice really and talking to the member of staff? Because sometimes it's pretty hard, isn't it? If you're a woman in the workplace and you're thinking, I don't quite know how to raise this with my boss.
I think that if the education's in place and managers are able to identify the symptoms, never approach someone and say, I think you're going through the menopause. But if you do recognise it, you can at least encourage them to approach their GP, and then they can come and have the conversation with you.
One of the things that government report talked about was maybe setting up like a bank of menopause ambassadors, wasn't it, and things like that. So. Yeah,
that's sort of like the government. I think that's someone who's going to be a ministerial role potentially, where someone's going to be looking at these kind of thing, as opposed to sort of specifically in each workplace. But I think from an employer's perspective, quite rightly to say, you don't want to be approaching an employee and saying, hi, are you going through the menopause? That's not the way forward. But if you see, especially if you've worked with someone for a while, if you approach an employee and you think something's going on here, just have a private chat with them and just say, hey, look, I just want to check that you're okay. Or I've noticed that you've been late a few times. Is there anything you want to talk about? I'm here, just making yourself available. And then it's just encouraging that conversation. And then the employer's in a position, once that their dialogue's open, is like they can start looking at the reasonable adjustments that Alicia's mentioned and helping where they can.
Because we talked on this show a lot over the last few months about how much Shropshire companies everywhere at the moment, are struggling to recruit decent quality staff. So the one thing you really do need to do at the moment is hang on to your good ones, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that thing we all know is retention is cheaper than recruitment overall, because the costs associated with recruitment can be quite extensive. And when you've got good staff, you should be doing what you can to hold on to them.
What are the sort of HR structures around policies like? I've heard people talk about companies maybe being encouraged to introduce menopause leave schemes or things like that, or a menopause passport. I think one of the hospitals in Birmingham was looking to do. And
so our base advice would be to have just a menopause policy that's outlining the support that's available, who to approach, put in their definitions so that it's not just managers that are being educated, but everybody else in the business. And maybe put in there examples of reasonable adjustments. So as I say, again, they're comfortable to say, okay, something can be done to help me. And
I mean, the leave point that you made, that was one of the recommendations made by the Women Equalities Committee, but it wasn't accepted by the government. They were sort of, they call it not accepted that recommendation, but they essentially rejected it because they felt that allowing women to sort of be out of the workplace for that period of time, they felt that was counterproductive to actual retention. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that, but it was something they thought about and they decided not.
I guess that's
proceed
a
with it.
difficult one to have a sort of one-size-fits-all policy, depending on what sector you're working in a bit, doesn't it?
Exactly. So it definitely would have needed more exploring before they could adopt it, but it's not something they're going to be proceeding with.
So let's let me finally just ask the two of you if there's one thing you'd maybe say to businesses, employers or employees, to take away from this discussion today, something to do or something to think about. What would you say? Who wants to go first? Jenny's got something to say.
Well, I reckon
tell.
we're probably going to say a similar thing. So I think it's about.
The risk.
I mean, I was going to say about education. You said about the risks, because if you don't address this, there are potential risks there. That not only do you have women leaving the workplace, which is obviously not good for your business, but also there are potential there for sex discrimination claims and also potentially disability discrimination claim.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say with the disability, particularly the average length of menopause is around 4 years. So if they do have severe symptoms, it can be classed as a disability. And then, that leads down the path of discrimination.
And there's actually a case, this is something we've seen in the tribunals. There was a case where it was found to be a disability because of the effect it was having on the woman in question.
Do you think the growing amount of case law that now exists from all of this helps to inform employers about about the dangers of not doing something about this?
Absolutely. They're going to be more alive to the issue if they think there's going to be potential, negative consequences of not dealing with it appropriately. But so go on.
No, go on, please.
I was going to say, but I do find that employers are very much, okay, we acknowledge that this is something that just needs to be looked at. So let's have a look at how we can address it, as opposed to kind of sticking the head in the sand.
And do you think, Alicia, in general terms, the majority of employers are very well aware that this is an issue that needs to be near the top of the agenda now? Would it be the exceptions that are not?
Definitely, it is coming up more as with well-being. I think it all kind of ties in together. I think just particularly, I know people use it a lot, but like since COVID, matters that were forgotten about are coming to the forefront again.
Because one of the symptoms of like menopause is that women can feel more anxious and stressed. So it does tie in with sort of mental health well-being as well.
And if you're a good employer, you recognise that in your teams anyway, don't you, to a degree?
Yeah.
So you'd hope.
You would hope.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure this is a debate we're probably going to be having many more times here on the channel, so we'll have to invite you back.
Yeah,
some other
would
time.
love to come back.
Jenny, Alicia, thank you so much. Thank you very much for
Thank you
coming
very
in.
much.
Great.